How's it going, guys? Welcome to the next episode of the Sports Spotlight with me, Joseph Fazio. As many of you know, starting this week is the NCAA 2017 March Madness Tournament, where 64 of the best college basketball teams in the nation fight for one national championship. Now today, we're going to be looking through what I believe is going to be the winning bracket. I'm not going to say that all of these picks are correct, but I like to think that I'm right on a lot of them. So let's start. We got the number one overall seed, Villanova, going against Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's did win against New Orleans last night on Tuesday, but I still believe that Villanova, as the number one seed in the country, will easily take this win. So I'm going to take Nova moving on to the round of 32. Pretty easy. Now, in the second game, we have Wisconsin going up against Virginia Tech. I say both teams are pretty equally matched. You know, Wisconsin going 25-9, Virginia Tech not playing as many games as Wisconsin did go on more in the Big Ten tournament. But personally, I believe that Wisconsin still will get the win over Virginia Tech, even though both are pretty equal. So I'm going to have to go with Wisconsin taking this game. Now moving over, we got the three seed, University of Virginia, going up against UNC Wilmington. Wilmington is having a good season, probably one of their most historic seasons, going 25-9, but still, you gotta think, it's a 5 seed. Some upsets will happen in a tournament, but I really do not believe that this is what's going to happen. So I'm going UVA, taking this one. Now, Florida versus Eastern Tennessee State University. At first, I did have the upset going with Eastern Tennessee University, but I feel like Florida is a more dominant team playing in the league that they are in. So I believe that most likely Florida will be taking this one. Now we go on to the next section. We have Providence going up against Southern California in the first round. Now, I can't say who is going to win because that's going tonight. I'll already know who won. Going up against SMU, 30-4 this season. They're probably, what I say, one of the toughest teams in the Eastern region to come out of that. So I'm definitely going to have to go SMU with this one. Providence, yeah, they are on a hot streak playing, but it's SMU. They have been doing a really good season. Next, we go on to Baylor versus New Mexico State. Personally, I would love to see Baylor lose because I'm going Oklahoma State, Big 12. Oklahoma State lost twice, really close games to Baylor. But 25-7, it's still really good. Probably not a 3 seed. I probably think that Florida should have been the 3 seed in the East, but New Mexico State, they really have no chance going up against Baylor, so I do have to go with Baylor moving on to the next round. Coming down to the next part, we have South Carolina versus Marquette. Now, I have to give a shout out to Matt Lawler, who possibly is going to South Carolina, but just for that reason, we got to go with Marquette. I'm just kidding, but honestly, I believe that Marquette is the more dominant team in this. I don't think they really should have been a 10 seed, more like a 8 seed going up against probably Wisconsin, or they shouldn't have been a 10 seed. They're a much better team than what the paper says and probably will get the W over South Carolina. Now, next going on, I'm just going to write this in. It's not even that hard to decipher. Duke versus Troy. Troy won 22-14. I don't even know how they made it in. But Duke, Luke Kennard, Grayson Allen, Jason Tatum, it's too much of a dominant team. So Duke obviously going. So now we're going to go to the West region, which will be held in San Jose. First game of the tournament will be Gonzaga versus South Dakota State. Now, some people have been skeptical of Gonzaga because of the conference they play in. The Western Conference isn't always the greatest. the teams aren't as matched as what other conferences, the Big 12, the SEC, have to play in. So even though that it's the first round, they're number one overall seed. 32-1, that was a great season that the Zags did have. So obviously, I'm going to have to go with the Zags going to the next round. Then we look over to the next part, South Dakota State versus Northwestern. I probably give it to Northwestern on this. Sorry, Vanderbilt versus Northwestern. I probably have to give it to Northwestern per paper. But looking at Vanderbilt, I think upset-minded, and I'm going to have to go with Vandy on this one. Next going up, we have Notre Dame versus Princeton. You got ACC going up against the Ivy League. The Ivy League has been doing really well in the tournament prior. You know, you got Harvard usually winning their first game over an upset, but I don't think that Princeton is as matched as this Notre Dame team is this year. So I'm going to have to go with Notre Dame taking the W on this one. Next up, we got West Virginia going up against Bucknell, another Big 12 team, possibly one of the top teams in the country. Probably, personally, shouldn't have been a 4 seed. I probably put them with a 2 seed, maybe. I wouldn't say a 1 seed because they did go with that, and with that 25-8 record, but still one of the really great teams in the Big 12. Going against a team, Bucknell, prior in other tournaments they have done well, but I feel like this is just West Virginia's year to make it possibly to the Sweet 16, maybe even the Elite 8. So I'm just going to have to give it to West Virginia for this one. Going now, we have Maryland versus Xavier. I will say this is going to be the first upset of the tournament, which I believe is going to happen. Maryland, they have some great shooters, play great defense, but Xavier, I feel like they always just pull it out of their, and Xavier seems like a great team this year, like they have been in the past. They did have a downfall from prior seasons, but I still believe that Xavier is going to get the upset this year. Going next, we have Florida State versus Florida Gulf Coast. We got the matchup of the Floridas going on. Florida Gulf Coast, we all know, has been a major upset team prior in years. They had that great run to the Sweet 16 about 3 years ago, I think, maybe 2. But this Florida State team is one of the dominant teams in the ACC, which is probably hands down the toughest conference in college basketball. And that's why, being a 3 seed, I have to give it to Florida State. Coming down to the last two, we have St. Mary's versus VCU. St. Mary's probably had the best year that they could have had, going 28-4, second in the Western Conference, losing to Gonzaga, even making it to the final of that game. I probably say I have to give it to them. They were one of the great teams in the country going up, but honestly, the conference they play in isn't the greatest, and the work VCU has put in this year, going to get that 26-8 record, I probably say that I'm going with another upset. Not much of an upset, but I think VCU is going to take this one. And going with the end of the Western Conference, Arizona, North Dakota. Arizona is just a dominant team this year. They probably could have had the number 1 overall for the Western. A lot of people are saying that they could go on to the Final Four, beating Gonzaga. And for this game, it's really no challenge. I gotta go Arizona. Now moving on, we have another Big 12 team going with Kansas, going against North Carolina Central or UC Davis. It's not really a tough choice, everyone. I think Kansas is the more dominant team, probably one of the most dominant teams in the country, and they definitely have this one. Next, we have Miami going up against Michigan State. Probably one of the more close matchups in the tournament. Tom Izzo's team this year has been as great as they usually were. That's probably why they got the seed. But I still think that Michigan State can pull off something against Miami, and that's why I truly believe that Michigan State will pull this one out. Even as the 9th seed, they're still pretty great. Now coming to the next game, Iowa State versus Nevada. Even though Iowa State is in the Big 12, so my personal bias is there, Ohio State probably is one of the greatest teams in this tournament, if I have to say. 23-10, all those losses came to like Kansas, Baylor, but Iowa State is one of the greatest teams in this tournament, and going up against a team like Nevada, there's no matchup. Now for Purdue, Vermont, I want to give the upset just because I'm in New England, but Purdue is probably one of the more dominant teams in this bracket. So going up against Vermont, giving Vermont the win would just be, it's just not real. It's not going to happen. So I'm just going to have to give it to Purdue for this one. Coming down to the next part of the bracket, we have Creighton versus Rhode Island. Now, Rhode Island just came off a great win for the Patriot League, and Creighton, as usual, has been having a great year. But I honestly have to say that this is going to be another upset. And honestly, Rhode Island, I hope that you guys do good things in the tournament. Next coming up, we have Oregon versus Iona. Not really a great matchup for Iona going up against Oregon. Even though they did lose their best player going into the tournament, it's still no match. Oregon definitely has to win this one. Now comes the game that I didn't want to have to talk about. Michigan, Oklahoma State. I'm going to Oklahoma State next year. So if I pick Oklahoma State, it'll make it seem like I'm playing favorites. But when you got to look at the team, 3 of their players averaging over 10 points per game. They're the #1 offensive efficient basketball team in the country. Michigan is the hottest team in the country right now. We all know that. They have been on a more than 5-game win streak, winning the Big Ten tournament, and Michigan probably will pull out this game, but I got to give it to my boys now, OSU. Go Pokes. Now going with the last part of this, it is an easy one to pick. Louisville, Jacksonville State, not really much of a matchup. It's 2-15. I just got to give it to Louisville. Now coming up for the South Division, I'd probably say this is the most liked team in the country, going North Carolina. They are going up against Texas Southern, so I truly believe that it's not even a close matchup. UNC all the way. Next, we have Arkansas versus Seton Hall, 8-9. I can't really decipher which team would win, so I can't really give a clear answer for who I believe should win, but based on what I saw on paper, Seton Hall has been in a decline in recent years, but I believe that this may be the year for them to come back. Next, we have probably the biggest upset that will happen in this tournament. I truly believe it. Minnesota versus Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee has been one of the most liked teams in this tournament to pull an upset, and I just got to go with everyone. I'm definitely picking Middle Tennessee to pull this one off. Next, we have Butler and Winthrop. If I had to pick any team to beat Villanova in the championship game, I'd have to go with Butler. Butler beat Villanova not once but twice this year, and I truly believe that Butler may have a chance to go to Sweet 16, even to the Elite 8, possibly the Final Four. I don't know, we're just going to have to wait and see, but Butler definitely winning this game. Next, we have the number 6 seed Cincinnati going up against Kansas State. Kansas State demolished Wake Forest last night in the first 4 game, and I truly believe that Kansas State is on a hot streak. So that's why I truly believe that this will be an upset and Kansas State will take the W. Next, we have the most bandwagon team in the country, if I can say. UCLA going up against Kent State. It's not even a matchup. Lonzo Ball is probably one of the greatest players in the country. He may get the Wooden Award. If it's not, probably going to be Frank Mason Jr. But Lonzo Ball and the UCLA Bruins will take this one, hands down. Coming against the final 2 games, we have Dayton going up against Wichita State. Wichita State, I believe, was very underranked in this tournament. Going 30-4 this season, they only got the 10 seed. And in prior years, Wichita State has used that underdog mentality to bring them prosperity. That's why I truly believe, as a 10 seed, they will definitely get this win over Dayton. And coming to the last game, Kentucky versus Northern Kentucky. I don't even think there's a matchup. It's not even a reason to say why, I believe, but Kentucky is definitely winning this. Now we're going to try and go quick fire on these. Nova, Wisconsin, both really great teams in this tournament, but still Nova as number 1 seed. Coming off a national championship run, there's no way that they're losing this. UVA, Florida, 2 really great teams. Florida as a 4 seed probably would win this game at any other point, but I truly believe that UVA does have this one. Going to the next, we have SMU versus Baylor. Baylor is probably one of the greatest 3rd-ranked teams in this country, only going 25-7, but SMU going 30-4. Even though they're in a much easier conference than Baylor, I probably have to go with SMU to pull the upset. Now we have Marquette going up against Duke. If I truly had to believe, I'd want to pick Marquette to get the W on this, but Duke, with all the talent that they have, all the key players, I truly believe that they're going to win this one. Now going down to the Western region, we have Gonzaga going up against Vanderbilt. Vandy, like I said, didn't have as great of a year, but it was still pretty good. But Gonzaga, all the players that they have, Karnowski, Hachimura, all the great role players on that team will definitely give them the win. Now we go down to Notre Dame versus West Virginia. Notre Dame coming off a loss in the ACC championship going up against West Virginia. Truly, I believe that on paper, West Virginia is the more dominant team, but for this game, I probably have to give it to Notre Dame. Now we go down to Xavier versus Florida State. I'm gonna have to go with what my gut says, and that's why I'm gonna choose Xavier, gonna knock out Florida State. Now we go down to VCU versus Arizona. There's really no matchup in this. I probably say that Arizona will blow out VCU if this game happens. Now going back to the Midwest, Kansas, Michigan State. I probably think that Michigan State does have a chance to pull the upset. It'll probably be a close game, but Kansas as the number 1 seed probably will make it on. Iowa State going up against Purdue. We got the 5 and the 4 seed. Love to see Purdue knock off Iowa State, but Iowa State probably is one of the dominant teams in the Midwest right now, so I'm going to have to give it to Iowa State. Rhode Island going up against Oregon. I'd really love to see Rhode Island pull up the upset against the number 3 seed, but probably won't happen, even though Oregon did lose their best player. Rhode Island isn't as great of a team as Oregon, as they went 24-9 with Oregon's 29-5. So that's why I'm probably just going to give it to Oregon for this one. Now, we see Louisville would go up against Oklahoma State. It's really a toss-up even if Oklahoma State will make it. I'd love to go with Oklahoma State just because it's my college, but in reality, I think we all know that Louisville probably would kill Oklahoma State in this game. Now, we go up to Seton Hall, which would pull up the upset against Arkansas. Not really much of an upset, but UNC, I'd probably say, is the favorite to win it all, so that's why I'm just going to have to give them. Now, Middle Tennessee versus Butler. Butler is one of the dominant teams in this tournament. Middle Tennessee does have the tendency to pull upsets, and that's why I'm, as a shocker, going with Middle Tennessee to go to the Sweet 16. Now, Kansas State pulling the upset against Cincinnati in the first round, going up against UCLA. Kansas State probably would give Lonzo Ball and the Bruins a challenge, but honestly, there's no way that UCLA would lose. Now, Wichita versus Kentucky. This is probably going to be one of the closest matchups of the tournament. Even though Wichita is a 10 seed, Kentucky, I think that there's not as sheer dominance as there has been in prior years, and they'll probably put up a good fight, but probably Kentucky will win this game. Now, we go down to the Sweet 16. We're going to go Nova versus UVA. I'd love to see UVA beat Nova, but honestly, there's no way. Then we go to SMU versus Duke. If there was one team to beat Duke in this tournament, going up against them, I know that Troy would be no match. Marquette maybe put up a fight, but SMU would have the dominance in the rankings with 27-8 for Duke, 30-4 for SMU, and I truly believe that the upset will be put off and SMU will go to the Elite Eight. Now we go down to Gonzaga versus Notre Dame. I'd love to see Gonzaga beat Notre Dame, which honestly probably would happen, but with this, Gonzaga always hasn't had a good tournament, usually going down in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, but I think that this year they're probably going down in the Sweet 16. So I'm going Notre Dame with this one. Next, we have Xavier versus Arizona. Arizona, I think, has the more sheer dominance in this game and probably will wreck Xavier up and down the court. Now going to Sweet 16 for the Midwest. If there was a team that I believe would, a number 1 seed, I believe, that would get out first, it'd have to be Kansas. Because I know that they will most likely meet Iowa State in the Sweet 16. And Iowa State, I believe, is a more dominant team than Kansas. And that's why I'm going to give Iowa State the win and move them on to the Elite 8. Now we move on to Oregon and Louisville. Louisville, the 2 seed, Oregon, the 2nd. Oregon, the 3rd seed, I'm sorry. Even though Oregon doesn't have their best player, like I said many times before, I truly believe that Oregon does have a more dominant team than Louisville, so I'm just going to have to give it to Oregon. Next, we come up with UNC versus Middle Tennessee. If Middle Tennessee does pull off not 1 but 2 upsets, there's a good chance that they'll have a great game up against UNC, but there's no way the UNC is losing a game going into the Elite 8. So UNC is moving on for me. Now with our bottom, UCLA, Kentucky, Pac-12 versus SEC. I'd like to give it to the Pac-12 on this one. Lonzo Ball and UCLA probably will dominate Kentucky in this game. I would like to say it would be a close game, but most likely it wouldn't. I probably think that Lonzo Ball, as one of the top point guards in the nation will take this game hands down. Now for this, I've been probably generous with Nova. Going up against SMU, it's probably one of the best teams that they could play. But still, with going off that national championship run last year, winning it, I probably say that Nova has the best chance to make the Final Four again. So I'm going to give it to Nova. Now, Elite Eight for this, we have Arizona versus Notre Dame. I'm just going to say it. Coming off the ACC tournament, losing, sadly, in the championship to Duke, which would get knocked out, I have to give it a Notre Dame on this one. I truly believe that they are one of the dominant teams in this tournament, and they versus Nova is going to be one of the greatest games of the year. Now, going down to the Midwest region, we would have Iowa State versus Oregon. I'd love to see Iowa State win, going up against Kansas in the previous round, but like I said, Oregon is probably the more dominant team in this tournament, and most likely for me would make it to the Final Four. Now for the last, UNC versus UCLA, probably one of the hardest choices I'd have to make for this. UCLA is probably more dominant on paper, even though UNC is the number one seed for that region. But UNC is out for blood this year off that buzzer beater against Nova in the national championship, and I truly believe that UNC will make it to the Final Four again. Now, looking at this, I have two number one seeds in Nova and UNC going into the Final Four, with a 5 seed in Notre Dame making it, and a 3 seed in Oregon making it. Going up against the first game, Notre Dame and Villanova. Villanova still is the most dominant team in this game. It will probably be close, but honestly, I believe that Nova will once again make it to the national championship. Now, looking at this Pac-12 versus ACC, I believe that the ACC was the dominant conference this year, and UNC probably will win this. I'd probably say it's going to be really close, but we're going to have a rematch of last year's final. Now, we all know that the national championship game last year was very close. Came down to the buzzer beater by Jenkins for Villanova. I'd like to see a close game, but I truly believe that UNC will win this year. This is UNC's year, and they will take that national championship. If I have to go with a score, probably in the 70s is safe. I'd probably give a score of UNC 77 to probably a Villanova 69. Well, that's what I have. UNC is why I believe it's going to win this year's Final Four and national championship. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe to see more. Thank you. Have a good one.